Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos and this video worship service for Sunday, April 11th, 2021. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people and gather together in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are at this minute, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome to be a part of this community. I invite those of you who are coming to us for the first time, especially through these video worships, to take a few moments to connect with us on Facebook, to sign our virtual guest book so we can be in touch with you, and to email me with any questions about you might be experiencing of us in these video worship services. The links for all of those, including my email address, can be found in the service notes below this video. Once again, we are glad you are with us today, wherever you are coming to us from, if even at any distance you are coming to us from today. And I look forward to being able to meet you in person and see all of your faces again soon. Holy are the places of memory, the places which have formed us, where we store the icons of success and shattered dreams and gather threads and pieces of what we would become. Holy are the places of memory. Holy are the places of the dream, the places over the rainbow, where all children are wanted and all people are fed, where colors are the source of celebration and youth and age come to the table as one. Holy are the places of the dream. Holy are the places of change and pain, the places of our struggle, where the rivers of our lives run white and fast, and we hold on, hold and grow. Holy, are the places of change and pain. Holy are the places of connection, the places where we risk ourselves, where hands, touch souls, touch minds, and in awareness still, we change our lives. Holy are the places of connection. Holy are the places of becoming, the places of clear vision, where life and world are intertwined and we can see forever in this moment and give thanks. Holy are the places of becoming. Blessed is the ground on which we stand, wherever we may stand. Holy and whole-making is this place and this time. Come, let us worship together. Please join with me now in our weekly affirmation.
Love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve life in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each and with all.
Jamie Civitello lights a candle this week for her older brother Jason, who has been fighting a hard battle with COVID for the past 3 weeks. For all our joys, all our sorrows, whether we share them with one another or we hold them close to our hearts, let us be together in a moment of silence. Please join with me now in a spirit of prayer and reflection. Eternal and beloved, gracious source of all life and all love, we are grateful today for this time out of time which we have set apart so that we might become more fully present to ourselves, to our communities, to that which we call holy. May our joys be celebrated together, our wounds be healed together, our hearts be opened together. O God of many names, the personal and the mysterious, we have come to a quiet time. an interior place, a place for the deepening of spirit, the enrichment of soul. We seek to know ourselves by knowing you. Let us have the courage to sit in the unknowing, to look for the answers even if they are to sit with our own questions, to be willing to be authentic with ourselves, to be ready to bring our face to the world. Let us be willing to know others by welcoming their genuine features, by welcoming them into the world, by appreciating the beauty that comes from seeing wholeness and truth. Let us all sit in that quiet depth. All this we pray in the names of those known and unknown, present and absent, remembered and forgotten, in the names of all the helpers of humankind. Amen.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
Hey guys. So, do any of you like learning about history? I really like learning about people and stories from history. These people and their stories teach me so much. I can learn about the history of the moon landing and who the people were that walked on the moon, like Neil Armstrong. Or I can learn about people like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, who stood up for people's basic human rights. Or I can learn about a woman named Clara Barton, who helped injured people during our country's Civil War and helped establish the Red Cross that now helps people all over the world get the medical care they need in times of trauma and crisis. Or maybe I can learn more about my favorite athlete or artist or scientist from history. Or maybe I can learn more about the history of the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos and how our church was started. Could learn about that. Or maybe
I can learn about my family history and the stories of my own family. Or maybe I can learn about people in history that have done pretty bad things and wars that have been fought. Sometimes learning about these things and these people teach me lessons on how to not make those same mistakes in the future. Or maybe I learn about the history of slavery in this country and how that history has led to some of the problems of racism and white supremacy that are still present here in the United States, which we still have to fight against, right? Or maybe I learn about the history of the land that I am living on and how it is still sacred land to the indigenous people, the Tewa people. Maybe I can learn more by visiting the Poe Cultural Center in Pewaukee to learn about the history of this Tewa land and the pueblos that still exist here. And maybe we could even invite a Tewa person to share some stories with our community about how this land is sacred to them. There's so much we can learn from stories of people throughout history. Learning about history involves a really important skill. What do you think? That important skill is to be able to listen. Our job is to listen to the stories of people. Some of these history stories can be great stories, and some of these history stories are not so great and fun to learn about. We humans make a lot of mistakes, and sometimes we need to learn from those mistakes and do better, right? So think of someone from history you might want to know more about. Well, in our Unitarian Universalist Church, we have pretty awesome stories about people too. And of course, we also have some stories of when we made mistakes too. But again, we learn from the great stories, and we also learn from the not so great stories and do better next time. One person I want to introduce you to today is Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. That is her right there. So I have this really cool book that will help us learn about her. Now, there have been lots of Unitarian Universalists who live out their UU values for inclusivity and justice, and Frances Ellen Watkins Harper is one of those people. She lived out her Unitarian values in the wider world, like some of you do. So she lived out her values of justice, abolition, equality, and human rights. Let's look. There's some things in this envelope right here that will teach us more about her. So I'm going to get some of that out. Let's see. Ooh. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Born in 1825, and her parents died in 1828. She was only 3 years old when her parents died. She lived in Baltimore, Maryland. Started to write poetry in her teenage years. In 1839, her poems were published in abolitionist journals. She lived at an underground railroad station, which had a profound effect on her writings and her activist work. And in the 1850s, she published Poems of Miscellaneous Subjects, which was sold over 10,000 copies over 5 years. Let's see what else we have. She also, as we know, wrote poems and short stories. Let's see. The Two Offers, a short story. So that is her short story. She got published. And one of her poems is titled, Bury Me in a Free Land. I ask no monument, proud and high, to arrest the gaze of passers-by. All that my yearning spirit craves is bury me not in a land of slaves. That's one of her poems. She was a writer. And she also believed that we humans are all connected to each other, meaning that we have to help even those who might seem like the weakest in our society. Let's read this quote that she wrote about that. We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity. And society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul. It's one of her quotes. She was a Black woman who grew up in the time of slavery in our country. And she spoke out against slavery and fought against it too. And she also spoke out for women's rights. So let's see. Here's another paragraph about her life. In 1859, Watkins' tale, the short story, The Two Offers, appeared in the publication Anglo-African, the first short story to be published by an African American. She helped escaped slaves along the Underground Railroad on their way to Canada. That's pretty cool. Frances Harper toured the South, speaking to large audiences, encouraging education for freed slaves, and aiding in Reconstruction. With slavery a thing of the past, Harper turned her energy to women's rights. She spoke up for the empowerment of women and worked with Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton to secure votes for women. Unlike Anthony and Stanton, Harper supported the 14th Amendment, which, together with the 15th, granted the vote to Black men, but not to women. Recognizing the ever-present danger of lynching, she reasoned that the African American community needed an immediate political voice. With that would come the possibility of securing further legal and civil rights. So may we all continue to listen to the stories of those who have gone before us. Because, to quote Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, we are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity. And this includes those people like Frances who have gone before us and paved the way by living out their UU values in the wider world and fighting to make this world better each day. So may we continue to listen and learn from these people and stories.
Our reading today comes to us from one of the pioneers of religious education in the Unitarian Universalist movement, Sophia Lyon-Foss. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies. Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days and fears of unknown calamities. Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness. Some beliefs are divisive, separating saved from unsaved, friends from enemies. Other beliefs are bonds in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern. Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction. Other beliefs are like a gateway, opening wide vistas for exploration. Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness. Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth. Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent to a changing world. Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life. Our theme for this month, our exploration together, is that of becoming. What does it mean to be a people of becoming? Who are we becoming as a people of faith? And I want to root the start of this exploration this week in our history to understand where we have come from and what we have inherited. Now, normally I would do this in an Introduction to Unitarian Universalism session with our visitors and new members, where I give what I call my 2,000 Years in 20 Minutes lecture, which never ever takes 20 minutes. It always goes 40 to 60. It always takes longer. So I'm going to spare you that this morning and just try to touch on the highlights here. First of all, that name, Unitarian Universalism, it's a big name. And where does it come from? Well, it comes from the merger of two distinct religions that grew out of two distinct theological perspectives that grew out of the early Christian church. Unitarianism was a theological statement about the nature of God, professed by church leaders in the first 200 years of Christianity, bishops like Arius, that God was a unity. God was one being rather than the Trinity of a Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, as some professed. Now, of course, that theological statement was declared to be a heresy and went underground, but ideas cannot be killed. They always bubble back to the surface, and Unitarianism came back. What started early in Christian history, over time, transformed to a theology that moved beyond Christianity. It took on a humanistic flair, a unity of humanity, if you will. Indeed, a unity of all creation, an acknowledgement that we all share and come from the same source, ultimately. Now, universalism, too, was an early Christian theological statement about the nature of God, professed in those first 200 years by church figures such as Origen, that a God who is a God of love, a loving God who loves his creation, would not condemn that creation to hell for all eternity, that we would be universally saved and restored to God at the end of all things. Now, this, too, of course, was declared a heresy and went underground, but you cannot kill an idea, and it bubbles back to surface over the time and moves from a Christian notion of universal salvation to an idea that hell is abolished completely, that there is no hell to be condemned to. Into the 20th century, to a search for not what was universal in salvation, but universal in all religions outside of Christianity and inclusive of it. To, over time, into the late 20th century and into now, an understanding of a universal interdependence among all people, among all creation, indeed, an idea that we share a common destiny. We share a common source. We share a common destiny. Unitarian Universalism. Now, today, we might say that Unitarian Universalism is a faith that is seeking a unity amidst all of our diversity as we come to understand that term. Or that we are, in fact, a religion that understands there is something deeper than all of our myriad differences, something that goes deeper amidst all our differences of race and gender and religion and class and what have you. Something deeper than our differences that binds us all together and connects us to all of creation, to all that is. Now, we describe that something deeper in our principles as a web, an interdependent web. And we describe it that way for some sense of a common understanding amongst us. But we know, too, that the true nature of that deeper something is far too big for any one of us to give a name to it. And we know, too, that even though we share a common understanding of that interdependent web, our own full understanding of that something deeper and our relationship to it grows from each one of our own individual lived experiences and from the inheritances we receive from our families and our cultures, and from our own individual sense of self in relationship to all that is. Now, the work of understanding that relationship, the relationship of the self to all that is what I call theology. Now, each one of us articulates that theology, articulates Unitarian Universalism's good news in very personal ways. My own UU gospel has remained mostly unchanged over time. Some of you will recognize it. We are, each one of us, givers and receivers of a deep, unshakable love, a love larger than any one of us, the great heart at the center of everything. We are, each one of us, unquestionably worthy of the lives we are given and worthy of our place in the web of creation. And our lives are invaluable there simply because we are. And we are, each one of us, past, present, and future, inextricably bound together in that something deeper, in that great heart love. And because of that bond, because we are so bound, we cannot give up on one another. Because I know that my freedom, the freedom of my body, my mind, and my spirit is wholly, utterly dependent upon the freedom of your body and mind and spirit. Now this is heady stuff, I will admit. And you might be wondering, and rightly so, what does this all mean on a practical level? And that's an excellent question, because a theology that only lives in my head and never makes it into the outside world is truly no worthy theology. As Sophia Lyons-Faz says in her reading, it matters what we believe, and two, it matters how those beliefs lead us to act in the world right here and right now. As I explained to our newcomers, Unitarian Universalism is a religion that asks not what shall we believe, but how shall we live? How shall we be together in the world? So I want to lift up today 3 stories and some resultant themes that are handed to us from our history to help shine a light on what a practical, boots-on-the-ground theology of Unitarian Universalism might look like. Our first story starts in 1803, when the Universalist Church in America passes one of its first statements of faith, what is called the Winchester Profession. Now, the early Universalists organizing as a church in America were already painfully aware of the great theological differences among their clergy and their laity between Trinitarianism and Unitarianism. For one example, about the nature of Jesus in relationship to God. All of that was in contention. And so the early Universalists here adopted a profession of faith that was phrasing their beliefs in a general terms that embraced all of these differences, that made room for all of these differences amongst their people. And it didn't stop just there. In addition to all of this general phrasing and this attempt to embrace everyone, in 1899, they adopted a freedom clause to that same Winchester Profession that said, this profession is commended as containing these principles, but neither this nor any precise form of words is required as a condition of fellowship. Right there is the beginnings of our development as and our understanding of ourselves as a non-creedal faith, the faith without a creed that we are today. A faith where differences in belief are embraced and that there is no single profession of faith to be required to be inside the club. In the place of a creed stands a covenant among us, whether it is stated explicitly or implied by our principles and the way we are together. A covenant that often harkens back to the one I described at the beginning of last month, an agreement of how we shall walk together in the ways of love, known and to be made known. Now there is and has been a historical tension, especially in Western religion, between faith that excludes and faith that embraces all. Our history is one of striving for inclusivity, striving for it. And as such, we have inherited from those who have come before an understanding of a deep love that is not limited to a narrowly defined us, but widens the circle more and more. Our second story begins around about 1835. In that year, William Ellery Channing, the founder of the American Unitarian Association, one of the first officially Unitarian ministers in this country, began vocally denouncing slavery, both from his pulpit in Boston and in essays and other writings. Now, strange as it may seem, this was not a popular stance in the Unitarianism of the day, where perhaps today we would say, of course, it's no brainer, we would be against slavery. It wasn't so easy then, because while the elite of Boston who sat in the pews of Channing's Unitarian Church might turn their noses up at the idea of slavery, they were also painfully aware, although they might not confess it out loud, that their fortunes, the very thing that made them the elite of Boston, were tightly dependent on slavery's continuation. But as long as it was just out of sight and the money rolled in, I guess, folks, we were just fine with it. Channing's Unitarian Christianity, his sense of what that meant, including the dignity of human beings, led him to a position of proclaiming that very dignity and humanity for the slave, and an endless profession that slavery must end for the sake of the slave's rights and dignity. He began his major essay on the subject thus: "The first question," he wrote, "to be proposed by a rational being is not what is profitable, but what is right. What is right and not what is profitable." A frightening message for some of his people to hear sitting in the pews, a message that directly challenged the very cherished status quo of his most well-to-do parishioners. Now, the anecdotal history says that those same congregants, so threatened and discomforted by what he was saying and what he was writing, would cross to the other side of the street rather than walk by him, so furious they were with him. And indeed, his refusal to stop preaching on the matter is one of the things that led to his eventual resignation of his pulpit. There is an ongoing tension, still today even, between religion used as a tool of empire, of status quo, of profit and power, and religion used as a tool of liberation. Our history, our inheritance from it, is one of striving toward that liberation, breaking the cycle of the status quo and striving for liberation. As such, we have inherited a sense of that deeper something, a sense of that big love that insists that wherever the status quo means separation from one another, means oppression of one over the other, insists that we channel that love toward the breaking and dismantling of that status quo, despite whatever discomfort it might bring us. Our third and final story begins around about 1965. Martin Luther King was organizing the Selma to Montgomery marches for voting rights. He knew he needed allies on his side. He knew especially he needed white allies on his side to increase the impact of his actions. Now, the story goes that King called the Unitarian Universalist Association headquarters one day, asking for people to come down. And it just so happened the board was meeting in session at that time. They answered the call and heard what King was asking us to come down and march with him. And the board adjourned right then and there and moved down to Selma to reconvene. And indeed, dozens of Unitarian Universalist clergy and laity would answer that call from King and arrive in Selma and follow the lead of a Christian minister and his associates. Follow the lead of those living in the thick of the consequences of the Jim Crow South. For some of those who made the trip, for James Reeb and for Viola Liuzzo, that would mean the end of their lives. There is in history an ongoing tension in religions, even today, between carrying a savior mentality and carrying a servant mentality. The former says, if you join that narrow us, that inner circle, and you assimilate to that us, you will be saved. And the latter, the servant mentality, says that we will offer what is ours. We will offer our resources. We will offer all that is our privilege in service of your liberation. Just tell us where we need to go. Our history is one of striving toward the servant mentality. From abolition to civil rights, to LGBT rights, to Black Lives Matter and other liberation movements of today, we aspire to an ideal given to us that says Unitarian Universalists show up when justice calls. And as such, we have inherited from those who came before a sense of that deep, big love that demands we show up for those who suffer injustice and demands that we stay in accountable relationship with them. Now, this is not our whole history. This is not the entirety even of these stories that I am sharing with you. There is always complexity to a story. There is always more history that defines who we are. And not all of it is triumphant or happy or a source of pride. But this is a part of the story of who we are when we are at our best. This is part of what we might choose to claim as our faith's inheritance. A love that does not exclude. A love that calls us to challenge the small-minded powers of the status quo. A love that calls us to show up in service to the suffering and the oppressed. This is where I want to start. This is the part of the story I want to tell of how we started. Just a couple of announcements before we conclude today's service. First, I want to remind those of you who are members and pledging friends that our annual Canvas collection period is still open. We are still waiting for some of you to turn your pledge forms in. If you would like to avoid a phone call from one of our board members, I would invite you to return that pledge form to the church office as soon as possible. If you would like a call from one of the board members and would appreciate that human contact, don't turn it in. We would love to talk to you about your pledge anyway. But please get those in as soon as possible. We need to be able to finish drafting our budget for the next church year ahead of our annual meeting at the end of next month. Secondly, I want to remind you that as the weather is turning warmer, this is an opportunity to remember that every inch of our beautiful grounds around this church building remain open, even as our building itself remains closed. Most of you know about our memorial garden and the lovely circle that is in there to sit in and be and look at the flowers and the fountain. And just beyond this circle, around to the west side of the building, there is a brick walking path, a sort of labyrinth that takes you through the trees and the hillside along the north of the building. Off to the side of that brick path, just before it takes that turn north, there is a lovely outdoor meditation space that was built for us by our Buddhist meditation group and is there for our youth as well. And as you follow the brick path around, you come to one end of our playground, the back gate to that. The playground has swings and things to climb on and a lovely little stage for story times or your other imaginative endeavors. All of this, all of our grounds are here for your use right now. And we welcome you to make use of this space by yourself or in small groups. And if you are gathering small groups, we ask that you stay masked and keep distanced if you're meeting up with others outside of your usual pandemic pod. But it's there for you, and it's just one small way that we can all be together somehow and try to maintain the connections with one another as we prepare for the happy days ahead when we know we will be able to gather together in full. Now, I myself will be holding my own open gathering time in that memorial garden circle starting this Tuesday and every Tuesday after that through the month of May at 2 p.m. every Tuesday. Just remember, Tuesdays at 2 in the garden. I would love to see you there and talk to you again and just be with you. I hope you'll join me. For the month of April, 100% of our weekly offerings will be given to a scholarship fund for our partner church in Fenyucut, Romania. All monies collected this month will be sent to our partner to help fund secondary education for the youth of the church. Please use the Givelify app on your mobile device to make your donation, or use the link in the service notes below. May what you give bring you joy. Friends, may life bless us and keep us. May the light of life shine upon us and out from within us and be gracious to us and bring us peace. For this is the day. This is the one wild and precious life we have been given. So let us all find a way to rejoice and be glad in it. Go in peace.